So thank you very much for the invitation. The presentation I'll do today is mainly based on a paper that I wrote with my colleague Nicole Fremlau, who is based at the University of Johannesburg and Oxford. And this paper was published last February on information technology for development, with actually quite troubled history because it was submitted to to an international development journal in the past because the idea was actually to engage with a broader development community, not just with the ICT for the community, ICT for development community, because essentially, and I will develop my argument throughout the presentation. The point is that development is changing the space, the arena of development, and the development humanitarianism nexus is changing because of AI, and essentially because of also the presence of new kind of actors, big tech to begin with, but also large international consultancies, which are essentially reshaping the way we do and think of development. So essentially, this article is trying to engage with this emerging field called AI for good, or also AI for social goods, which is based on win-win narratives between big tech and international organization on the potential of digital technologies, and particularly AI, to address the SDG agenda. So essentially, the background of the paper is really to get in conversation with this funding fields of policy and practice. So there's an emerging literature about the AI for social goods movement, which, as I say, trying to leverage artificial intelligence and machine learning to achieve the SDG. And it also is based on belief that synergies between the tech industry, big tech in particular, and development humanitarian actors can better address the SDGs also more effectively and more efficiently. And actually, this agenda is endorsed by international and aid organizations such as the UN, but also financial institutions like the World Bank, industry associations such as the GSMA, which is the mobile telecom industry association, and the International Telecommunication Union (ITU), which every May, every year, actually convene stakeholders for a large AI for Good summit in Geneva, and also corporate philanthropic entities such as the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Mastercard Foundation, and also the foundation attached to that emanate from big tech actors such as Google, Microsoft, and Meta. So, okay, just to specify, by big tech here, I will refer to the world's largest tech firms by capitalization. So Apple, Microsoft, Alphabet, Google, Amazon, and also Meta, which is the former Facebook. Although in this paper, I will include also other large technological corporations such as IBM that are particularly active in the AI for social good space. So one thing that's emerged from the literature on both gray and academic literature on AI for social good is the fuzziness of the concept. So there is no really definition of what good is. And in fact, it's based on the assumption that good has displaced development to some extent, and also to shield good, to shield the purpose for which AI is deployed for from to transcend sort of a political domain and see good as something of metaphysical benefit, because it's very difficult to question good, right? You can question a model of development, but actually referring to this kind of interventions of AI for good in a way transcended the political realm. And it's also draw on what other scholars in humanitarian studies called humanitarian neophilia, which is essentially based on an optimistic faith in the possibility of technology combined with a commitment to the power of the market. So the critical point about AI for social good is that by displacing the concept of development, actually frame controversial and profitable data practices as having public value, and therefore obfuscate the power relations and politics of digital capitalism, which essentially animate the entire field. So the idea is essentially that AI for social good is used as a sort of Trojan horse to advance corporate interest. And I will develop this argument throughout this presentation. In general, the emphasis on data-driven technologies applied to the SDGs signals a shifting technopolitics of development, increasingly influenced by tech firms and specifically US-based big tech corporations. So what I'm trying to do in this paper is essentially first of all to situate AI for social good on the one hand within a longer history of corporate power, technology, and development. So in this case, I would frame AI for social good as part of a trajectory that goes from ICT for T and then digital development, and now with new actors, new paradigm, and new strategies take shape as the AI for social good. But also what I want to try to do is to highlight the nexus between AI for social good and other agendas, particularly what is the so-called fourth industrial revolution agenda, which is a framework that places AI and digital innovations at the center of national development and industrial policy agenda. And essentially, the entire point of this paper is to prompt the reflections on the implications of AI and AI for social goods, and the way policymakers, scholars, practitioners, and also community-based organizations do and think of development. So it's something that I aim to speak to, not just, as I say, not just to ICT for these scholars, but to the broader the global development community. So a key point that I want to make is that what we have seen recently is a sort of fetishization of AI, a fetishization in the very Marxist sense. It says the I is disentangled from the power relations that actually shape the discourse and also the practice of AI. And the point also that I want to make is that when we see AI for social good, actually we have to read big tech for social good. And there is growing evidence, there's growing literature and media reports showing how most innovation in the space of AI are actually developed within corporate labs. And essentially saying AI means essentially big tech. This is because AI computing power to process large generative and predictive models. Also can poach the best talents in the industry because they can pay much better, and also because of geopolitical clouds of big tech. I'm referring in this specific case to US-based big tech. So what is happening is essentially that by framing AI as an innovation disentangled from power relationships, essentially big tech are like obfuscating their role in advancing this conversation. So again, every time we see AI for social goods, we need to understand that we are talking about big tech, and the way big tech is essentially reshaping the space of development, the SDG agenda, and the way the entire space of development is depoliticized. So I'm linking this conversation on AI for social goods to the fourth industrial revolution agenda, not just because the actors are almost the same, but also because the premises are very similar. It's about the fourth industrial revolution agenda refers to the integration between digital, biological, and physical worlds. facilitated by the widespread use of emerging technologies in order to advance socioeconomic transformation. So it is a strongly technocratic approach to socioeconomic transformation and development. And in this assemblage of technologies is expected to refashion modes of production and social reproduction, including the articulation of capital and labor, and also the relationship between national states and the private sector. Now, this agenda, which is also labeled as digital transformation, is embraced by international organizations and advanced by the World Bank and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, and is particularly advanced by the World Economic Forum. It's actually spearheaded by the World Economic Forum through centers that I will describe in detail in the course of the presentation. So the point is that AI for social goods and the fourth industrial revolution are mutually reinforcing discourse that serve the purpose of depoliticizing the development arena, or at least to conceal politics. By bestowing legitimacy and authority to big tech to reshape policy space and epistemic infrastructures. So again, it's not just how we shape the conversation about development, but how we know where we should focus our intervention and in which way. So the idea of depoliticizing is drawn from the work of Tanya Marelli, which actually link the framing of development challenges and the range of solutions to address them. So the idea of rendering technical, rendering political, is essentially about shifting power to experts entrusted with improvement, which excludes the structure of political economic relations from diagnosis and prescriptions. So in this sense, AI for social goods appears as another additional weapon in the armory of the anti-politics machine, constituted by the discourses and practice of development. Gradually, corporate actors, particularly through AI, have acquired growing influence by providing technical expertise to frame developmental issues and address its solution. But again, the politicization is a strongly political act, is an act through which decision making is actually obfuscating. So while we agree with the idea that AI could change how development challenges are identified, studied, and managed, we also think that it's paramount to unpack the power relationship behind the AI assemblage. So we also kind of cautious about sweeping generalization, particularly as Western, mainly US-based and Chinese digital tech firms deploy very different strategies at the vie for influence and market shares in the global South. Now, comparing their approaches beyond the scope of this article, and we are mainly concerned with the US-based corporations who suggest the libertarian technology, the libertarian ideology of Western tech giants is percolating into development strategy and discourses, also with mixed results. So the idea of linking AI for social goods and fourth industrial revolution is to bring to the fore the prominent role of corporate actors and advocates in essentially framing development issues as technical and address a solution. So there is also a trend to leverage corporate-driven AI and datafication to render opaque the production of evidence on which policy making is based, and also process to implement these policies. And in this presentation, I will actually structure my arguments by identifying three different ways in which this strategy is pursued: by influencing the policy space, by capturing and reshaping epistemic infrastructures, and deploying predictive power. So the paper, which this paper is based, essentially drawn a literature review and interviews with policymakers, data scientists, corporate executive, international consultant, and digital activists. It's also based on over 50 years engagement with the digital development community. Um, Mainly in Africa. Most of the examples here are from Kenya, Rwanda, South Africa, where together with my colleague Nicole, we have conducted field work between 2019 and 2022. Field work, but also interviews like remotely, particularly during the pandemic. So what we want to do here now is essentially to situate temporally AI for social good within a longer history of big tech engagement in the global south. Essentially moving from ICT for T to the dedication of development. So information technologies in general were first embraced by international organizations, NGOs, institutional donors to support development interventions on specific issues. More recently, though, corporate actors have taken the lead in going beyond sealed solutions to address developmental challenges and focus instead on the expansion of data infrastructures. And so since the 80s, tech firms have been increasingly penetrated markets in the global south on the heels of the popularity of the personal computer first, and later the internet and mobile phones. So even before that, big corporations like IBM and Hewlett-Packard have been instrumental in shaping technopolitics of development by enabling states to expand their infrastructural power. And also corporations such as IBM have been also instrumental in prepping like regimes such as the apartheid regime, the South African regime during apartheid. So in general, public tech corporations have provided service to national governments to implement the specific political agenda. Now, from the 90s, there have been a growing influence of tech community, of tech organization, in order to mainly overcome digital divide, strengthen the civil society organization, and improve state accountability. So all these initiatives were framed within the broader good governance agenda and were mainly part of corporate social responsibility. Were mainly framed as the corporate social responsibility initiatives. The point was also to fill the void left by the state during the structural adjustment programs of the 80s. I'm thinking particularly about initiatives in digital culture to provide digital extension and in general to create digital infrastructure across rural areas, in hard-to-serve areas across the global south. This phase went from the 90s to the early 2000s, and this is part of the shift from ICT 4D to datafication of development. So 2000, in a way, with the formalization of the Millennium Development Goals, so a greater commitment of tech organization into the development space. So international development organization, NGOs, shaped the trajectory of ICT4T, and private sector that provides support to pioneering NGOs such as Computer Aid. As I say, the priority in this phase was to address the digital divide between the global north and the global south. So in early 2000, tech companies started being more conspicuous in this space by supporting national development agencies and NGOs agencies with specific initiatives. One laptop for child was particularly popular, or networks of telecenters established in San Francisco and then incubated by Microsoft and Canada International Development Research Center. Now, in 2010 was to some extent a watershed because with mobile revolution, connectivity seemed all of a sudden much more accessible. And the Agenda 2030, moreover, placed corporate actors at the center of the SDG strategies. So in this case, the shift was from siloed initiatives to address specific projects to a broader engagement of tech companies within the space. Now, in this infographic, I'll try to visualize this shift from the MDG era, which saw the rise of the ICT4D discourse and the involvement of civil society organizations, and then more and more NGOs and aid organizations, and then the SDG phase, which saw a shift towards digital development and greater engagement of national governments, philanthropic capitalists, corporate philanthropic organizations such as the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, then the MasterCard Foundation, and also greater involvement of the private sector, which in the Agenda 2030 was framed as a full-on development actors. We also see the growing role of international consultancies such as McKinsey, Bain, PricewaterhouseCoopers within the development space, essentially to advise the government on how to create enabling environments for tech companies to invest in this space, and then big tech essentially becoming more and more involved and blurring also the boundary between IT in developing countries and IT for development. So this is essentially when IT AI for social good started emerging, and particularly because of innovation in the fields of AI. Now, this is particularly important for my argument, because on the one hand, we see that corporate actors and tech actors in particular have gained prominence within the SDG agenda during the same period in which AI essentially went through a radical transformation. It was around the same period, it was about in the early 2010, in particular 2012. Now, AI research actually traced back to the 50s, and since the beginning has been animated by imperial and capitalist aim in order to advance the imperial project of its patrons. And it was initially devised as in the context of the Cold War as a tool to gain strategic advances over the Soviet Union and also advance the US imperial agenda. And so Katz speak of AI as a sort of as a technology imbued of whiteness, and stepping into the field's composition epistemologies, not just because most of the scientists were white, but also because they advanced a project that reflected the imperial interest of the US. Then AI research went through what was called the AI winter in the 80s and 90s, with dwindling funding for AI research and shift towards other priorities, and then started gaining renewed popularity, renewed interest until 2000. Now, the watershed was really 2012, because in 2012 was the year when the neural network architecture developed by Geoffrey Hinton gained prominence within the AI communities. Essentially, also called deep learning, is marked a move away from the so far dominant rule-based approach to symbolic knowledge. So until that very moment, AI systems were actually fed with instruction in order to address specific problems. But this new approach essentially marked a paradigm shift. So AI had to engage with the world more and more in order to learn. And this is why the companies that embrace this new vision of AI had a further interest, essentially in engaging in different forms of the world. So possibly not just in terms of corporate social responsibilities, but also to address a specific agenda in order essentially to access data with which they could train their model. The idea was that AI was no longer just a box that could be fed with information a priori, but to learn. So there was when the importance of acquiring and working on specific data sets emerged, and the idea that AI must engage with the world to learn. And this is essentially when AI also gained prominence in, particularly with the triumph of IBM Watson. Well, at the time, actually, when Watson won Jeopardy, was not yet part of IBM. It was acquired later. But essentially, this approach to artificial intelligence emerged the turn of 2010, so in 2011, when Watson, this innovative AI system, won Jeopardy. And IBM essentially embraced this approach and launched what was called Project Lucy. Project Lucy was launched in 2014 and was the harbinger of a trend to come. So the idea of deploying AI system to address specific problems. So this is actually how the CTO of IBM Watson at the time framed the launch of IBM Watson and Lucy in particular. So it was launched in an official ceremony in Nairobi, and the idea was essentially to address the problem. They used a lot of rhetoric and emphasis, where we call this Lucy, essentially as an homage to the remains of the hominid found in Turkana. And so the idea was that Lucy will have addressed several problems in terms of energy, food, and health. And it was framed as a solution to help us marry together cognitive computing and problems of Africa. So this is essentially how this project was launched. Now, Lucy failed clearly after a few years because of the hype surrounding the initiative, because of mismatch between the design and the implementation of the project, because of neglect of the ethical concern related, for instance, to initiatives that use the facial scan in a Kenyan school to address the issue of low school attendance. So essentially, Lucy was set aside. But still, the legacy of Lucy survived in the way the disruptive approach typical of AI, of suffusing surrounding AI discourses, percolated within the development space. And so this is in 2018, for instance, the World Bank and Credit Suisse launched this Disruptive Technologies for Development Fund, and which was presented by the then World Bank president as a way to address urgent challenges all around us, from climate change to displacement, which also required, I think, not just of approach, but also strategic partnership. So it was launched actually in California, in Silicon Valley, because since then there was the idea of engaging with big tech, with corporations based in California. Now, we see how this rhetoric of disruption, as I say, seeped into the developing arena. The idea of, well, Google claims of move fast and break things actually apply to addressing sustainability issues, and ushering in this technocratic approach, this AI-driven technocratic approach to the development. Yet it was not very clear what had to be disrupted and why, and then also to lead to what. But essentially, signaled the presence, the influence of growing actors in this space. As I say, big tech with their disruptive rhetoric, and in a mode of in a specific approach to development based on essentially removing politics from displacing politics from view, reshaping epistemic infrastructure, and also emphasize the power of AI in building predictive models. So the three dimensions that are essentially connected. And in the next section, I will go through three different aspects by essentially drawing also on the interviews with the stakeholders. So by policy spaces, first of all, we mean the freedom and ability of a government to identify and pursue the most appropriate mix of economic and social policies to achieve equitable and sustainable development. Development is pursued to its particular national context. So Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, and Microsoft, what we refer to as big tech, are among the biggest spenders on lobbying. That was in 2018 in the US, and actually the lobbying power has increased over time. So they have also established organizations to shape the conversation around AI and the potential of AI to address societal challenges. For instance, despite being competitors, Microsoft, IBM, Amazon, Meta, and Alphabet participate in the Partnership of AI, and Partnership on AI, which is an organization established in 2016 to steer the conversation around AI and sustainable development. Essentially framing big tech as better positioned than politicians to address these challenges. And essentially, the idea is essentially to manage perception and conversation around AI. Now, a part of this conversation is also the World Economic Forum and the Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which was initially established in 2017 in San Francisco, despite the headquarters of the World Economic Forum being in Geneva, because the idea was to involve since the beginning big tech within this conversation. So the idea was to shape the trajectory of new and emerging technologies, specifically from a governance perspective. So this emerged from an interview with World Economic Forum perspective. And the idea was that there was a need to address the gap between how fast technologies are developing and how quickly the governance parameters are shaping up. And the assumption being that people coming from the industry, from big tech, are better positioned to address this gap. So the Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution essentially established new headquarters across in 15 countries, including 2 in Africa and South Africa and Rwanda. Each center has a large autonomy in managing portfolio of technology policy projects, coordinated with the headquarters in order to leverage the forum extension network to get together a community of like-minded people, experts to develop frameworks and pilots. So in 2021, also the Global AI Action Alliance was launched by IBM and Microsoft in partnership with the OECD, UNICEF, UNESCO, International Trade Union Confederation, and also universities, Northwestern universities, Imperial College, University of Toronto, and also think tanks. So the idea was essentially to, together with the Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution, was to bring these frameworks and pilots to scale. So the way it was framed was to scan the horizons, to speak to our partners, to look out for interesting opportunities to develop consistently with our criteria, including the neutrality of the project, its multi-stakeholder design, and scalability. So the Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution also strengthened ties with the consultancies such as McKinsey, Boston Consulting Group, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and Deloitte in shaping the policy trajectory of the Fourth Industrial Revolution agenda and deployment of AI to essentially to bring about societal transformation. And also to help clients, by clients, I mean also state agencies. So how it was presented by a Deloitte South African executive, our role is to help clients understand what narrative is, understand what AI is, and what adequate policies will look like, and what we need an AI strategy for. So AI, so our job is really about helping government that can make those type of decisions and figure out what it means. So again, is to feel the fuzziness of this concept of AI for social goods, which, by the way, in South Africa, is replaced by fourth industrial revolution. So within this strategy, to define the strategy of the politicization of the policy space, there's also a vision of market-driven development in which digital firms feature prominently in shaping the regulatory frameworks, so the rule of the game to roll out AI initiatives. And also the framework that defines what trusted, transparent, and inclusive AI system mean. And the idea is also to translate national AI strategy into action. Now, this approach of this corporate actors, of which essentially which are represented by entities such as the World Economic Forum for Center for Performance and Evolution, is essentially that first of all, is an emphasis placed on results rather than process and ethical concern. So one of the comments was particularly highlighting in this sense was offered by a World Economic Forum executive. If you're talking about developing countries, you can definitely speak on behalf of India. I don't know which title, but the priority still is the application side of technology. So the idea was essentially that our priority is to roll out this application, right? So if you're rolling out an application of artificial intelligence for culture, they'll be like, we want this to impact the life of farmers first. And then we can talk about ethics and governance. But also another issue that emerged was this wide capability gap between, on the one hand, the public and private actors on the value of data and how to use data, considering that private actors, big tech in particular, have such a computing power that allow them to extract value from the data sets that are produced through this engagement with the world. But also the gap between big tech and small tech firms. So it is not just about leaning towards the private sector instead of the public sector. It's also acknowledging the predominance of big tech, which have more, as I say, extensive geopolitical clouds, computing power, and expanded digital infrastructure to process, to extract value from the data they have generated. So big tech, again, has a competitive edge over small tech firms, and driven by monopolistic tendencies, pursue a strategy of proprietary lock-in through digital platforms. Which leads to the second point, so the shaping of epistemic infrastructures. So when we talk about infrastructures that have been growing interest of big tech into the space, initially as a corporate social responsibility initiatives since 2010 Haiti earthquake. This is actually something that most interviewees pointed out. The earthquake in Haiti in 2010 presents an opportunity for a US big tech, not just to burnish their CSR credentials, but also to experiment with the rapid rollout of ambitious new projects. And there was the case of Google, IBM, and Facebook. Also, it was a case in which they start focusing not just on the unconnected, but also on the underconnected. And the idea was, on the one hand, to build the digital infrastructure to increase resilience, preparedness ahead of future disaster, but also to create, to increase connectivity in order to provide a more stable platform to access their services. This also marked a shift towards what is called the platformization of development. So the strategic rollout of digital platforms to deliver services on behalf of the state. So there has been a shift in emphasis from connectivity infrastructure to digital platforms. So this also emerging from a growing awareness of the value of data as a resource to glean a more granular view of the context of implementation. Also fulfill donors or shareholders' need of evidence, but also increasingly train predictive models. So in this sense, digital infrastructure work as extractive infrastructure, epistemic infrastructure, they play a critical role in fine-tuning algorithms. So in this sense, big tech use AI for social good through initiatives to address specific developmental challenges as a safe space to train the predictive models by partnering with governments and international organizations that want to burnish their innovative credentials. We're talking about UNHCR, for instance, UNICEF, or World Health Organization, and want to use essentially their data from their population of concern as a as algorithmic fodder, so as data set to train their predictive models. And this is, for instance, an example from Google, particularly this platform, Google Flood Hub, which is used to is an open platform used to predict the risk of floods all over the world. They have developed specific applications in specific contexts. They have partnered with the state of Bihar in India to target the risk of flooding there. This leads to the third point. So, how to gain a foothold in specific countries. I mean, what big tech can offer, and this is where big data reveals their value by essentially training, allowing to train predictive model and allowing big tech to show their power of prediction based essentially on extensive data set and also extensive computing power. So Google, Microsoft, and IBM have increased trust in marketing their predictive power as artificial intelligence as a service, which means that they provide all means to organizations to essentially use predictive power, organization and national governments. So essentially, governments, humanitarian organizations need to develop in-house AI capacity. They can simply rely on big tech to generate predictive model. As essentially was clearly explained by a former IBM data scientist, the problem with AI is that you have to know what kind of tools you need in order to develop a solid language model. And so you can charge people for usage. So big companies tell small companies that you access to the core and you can build your own product. And hopefully you do it on our cloud, so you can we can charge you an arm and leg for that. So essentially, it's about locking in clients, including like state agency within proprietary systems. Just how AI for SDG initiatives can be seen also as an opportunities for big tech to showcase their capacities and trust relationship with governments and state agencies. So this is the few quotes from a corporate executive showing how by entering market with projects to predict, to build the flood forecasting using satellite imagery, or essentially providing other services. Corporations have entered lucrative markets across the global south to lock in national governments within their proprietary systems. And we're talking not just about national government, but also international organizations. And one example that was briefly to mention is this expanding field of policy of action called anticipatory humanitarian action, which has been officially endorsed by the UN, is based on preparedness. And so it's about anticipating humanitarian crisis rather than responding to them. And this infographic essentially summarizes a project developed by the Danish Refugee Council in partnership with IBM, based on machine learning model and by using network analysis, essentially to predict, to anticipate the size of displacement in different humanitarian crises by using historical records. So on the one hand, that it will help humanitarian organization to better map what is happening, predict what could happen, and so mobilize resources in advance. But at the same time, as explained by essentially humanitarian worker collaborating with this project. That also gave the opportunity uh, to IBM to essentially to test their predictive model. So to understand how their model can be improved and to make their prediction more accurate. So develop this model, and then essentially would benefit also for the commercial applications of their models. So I talk more about this anticipatory humanitarian action space within a report that I can make available. And it was just to jump to the conclusion, and it's also scope for further research. So what is interesting to explore now is that while what they have described so far are attempts by big tech to penetrate markets in the global south, there should be there is space to examine initiatives animated by policymakers and civil society organizations to wrestle the control of the infrastructure from foreign tech firms who make them more accountable. So being also called for decolonizing the AI, advances in specific fields by organizations such as Masakane, which work on large language models, and is also part of the Mozilla Foundation. There's also the growing, expanding agenda of digital sovereignty, which has been advanced by countries such as Ethiopia, Rwanda, Senegal, South Africa, and Nigeria, just to speak about African countries, based on data localization laws, publicly funded AI research center, and expansion of these centers. So it's really worth exploring more and more the issue of national strategies to negotiate AI agendas and incorporating corporate strategies within their national development strategies. It will be also interesting to look at different approaches of US, European, and Chinese corporations to secure partnership with African governments or governments across the global south, and how they seek to navigate difference and their advantages and to achieve national security goals and economic growth. And also growing demands by local advocacy organizations for greater accountability and transparency in data and AI assemblage. So essentially there is also a call for us academics to focus more on to repoliticize the conversation around digital technologies and development. So again, AI for social good programs emanate from an attempt to constellation of corporations, international organizations, philanthropic capitalist foundations that not always share the same goals and motivation. But they're aiming at outsized impacts shaping the policy conversation around AI and development, influencing the regulatory framework to facilitate the expansion of that infrastructure and asserting a hegemony of technical experts in charge of anticipating the futures. So as development scholars, we need to emphasize the political nature of future making, of development, and the idea also for ICT for the scholars is to put stress, to emphasize the D of development and keeping the spotlight on the political nature of the concept. Thank you very much for your time.